in major universities who had previously 5 years ago completely poo-pooed the ketogenic diet now have whole divisions dedicated to low carbohydrate, ketogenic diets, intermittent protein diets. Interestingly enough, whoever the heck designed us, when we are in high ketosis, the brain gets faster and sharper, the musculature has faster reaction time, and the cardiac pumping capacity is better under ketosis. I put them on our exogenous ketones. They each lost 30 pounds. And by the way, they were sisters, separated by 2 years. They both gave birth to children, and they both successful, healthy kids. They both, unfortunately, gained the weight back, then wanted to have kids again, so they couldn't conceive when they were overweight. When they shrunk the weight, they got pregnant again, and all came out well. So, that's pretty much cause and effect.
Hey, everybody, it's Regan Archibald with Unreasonable Health. And today I wanted to give you a great bio for our presenter and now who's fast becoming one of the world's leaders in ketone research, not only the ketogenic diet, but how exogenous ketones can transform your life. And this is Dr. Michael Wool. He's a medical doctor, and he first started his medical practice during the AIDS pandemic in San Francisco in 1985, and he stayed on the cutting edge of research, particularly in the field of HIV and immunology. He targeted a wide array of different medications and produced some of the most novel innovations in the healthcare industry in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and that's what he's doing today in 23. It's amazing. He did his first 2 years of medical school at Stanford School of Medicine, and then he earned his medical doctorate from George Washington University School of Medicine in 1982, graduating with distinction. He also did his internship at the California San Francisco Pacific Hospital in internal medicine, and then shortly thereafter, he immersed himself into really combating the AIDS epidemic that was very prominent in that area. So I think you're going to really enjoy just learning, about him and the progress he's made. Some of the other things that he's done, he's been a member of the Food and Drug Administration Task Force on adverse allergies associated with natural latex glove use. He also worked with the National Institutes of Health in its Division of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And yes, he did work with Dr. Fauci, for those of you who are wondering. He, for better or worse, but he's doing great work now. So don't hold that against him. But he also participated in studies relating to pneumocystis carinii, cryptococcus, and cytomegalovirus, anemias, herpes simplex. And he was also able to create multiple medical devices leading to successful 510K and NDAs of multiple FDA approvals. So he's got a litany of pretty amazing things that he's done, not only in his work with the immune system, but he's also been involved in pharmaceutical consultations, water purifications, healthcare manufacturing, medical media and entertainment production. He also was very involved in doing organ transplants. And then in 2007, he founded a company, the Forbidden City International, and this co-produced the critically acclaimed and award-winning film directed by Joel Blasberg called A Withdrawal from Gaza. And this was a documentary following the flight of 8,500 Jewish settlers extricated from 21 kibbutz on the Gaza Strip in 2005. He also holds 4 U.S. patents and copyrights on the internet and cell phone, interactive media, and gaming technology. He also created the first credit card size 6-lead portable ECG heart monitor. And as I mentioned earlier, the latex glove innovation. And then since 2005, he's devoted his entire career exclusively to the research and studies on ketones. And so you'll see this in the upcoming interview. And we're going to have him on more, but he established what's called Keto 5. And he co-invented the proprietary exogenous ketones, exogenous and exoimmune. And you'll be able to get these into the clinic by the time of this recording, which I'm excited about. And he studies these. Not only has he found these products to be useful in the field of sports, but law enforcement, U.S. elite armed forces, and then also various inflammatory disorders, neurocognitive disorders, and even in the field of oncology. So he talks a little bit about cancer on the show, but this has been a great treatment for several of the people who have cancer. He has also most recently been conducting clinical trials at the Cedars-Sinai Hospital and other Los Angeles community hospitals in the antiviral and anti-infective therapy. And he's got, just so you know, and he wants you to know this, but he has no pharmaceutical manufacturer, financial support, or disclosure. So without further ado, enjoy the show. And here is Dr. Michael Wool.
Well, Dr. Michael Wool, it's so good to have you on Unreasonable Health. And as we jump into ketones and what they can do, I think there's no one better to talk to about this particular subject versus you. As everyone heard from your introduction, you have an endless background of great science and research. Not only that, but you hold patents and copyrights in several different areas, including the portable ECG heart monitor, latex glove innovation. But the real thing we're going to jump into is these exogenous ketones, the exogenous and the exoimmune. But as we kick it off, I mean, if you look at the world of ketones from when you first were introduced to it, I know it was when you were doing some of your transplant work, to where it was then and what you knew about it then to where it is now. What's been the thing that surprised you most about this research and technology?
Well, first of all, Regan, thanks so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to address your audience. I've been a basic scientist and physician for almost 45 years and been in labs, etc. And I've been involved in ketones since it actually has sort of become commercially available as an exogenous form. Ketones were actually used in fasting probably back in 500 BC by Pythagoras in the ancient Greek times. But it wasn't until 1924 that an American physician named Wilder actually started using ketosis and a ketogenic diet to treat epilepsy. But more recently, since beginning around 2010 or so, we began to address the ability to give people ketones that are made, as our company does, that are bioidentical. They're exactly the kind of ketones that your body makes, which is also known as beta-hydroxybutyrate. The other ketones, of course, are acetone and acetoacetate. These are the three, quote, ketone bodies that your body makes, either in the liver or from fat metabolism. The biggest thing that's happened since the advent of the early days in 24, when we were treating epilepsy, is that over the more recent, since 2014 or so, was one, the ability of the ketones to modulate how your body cellular organisms talk to each other. So by reducing signaling in certain things or amplifying signaling, we get different sorts of health outcomes. In weight loss, for instance, everybody's sort of heard about the semaglutides like Wegovy or Manjaro, and they modulate ghrelin, right? But so does ketones. Ketones modulate ghrelin in a very, very similar manner. So that's one example. Another example is that certain drugs that are so-called targeted biologic therapy for rheumatoid arthritis, these are because science has designed a particular molecule to block an inflammatory molecule your body may produce to cause arthritis or inflammation of joints. But we find that ketones are like the master switch. It can actually shut down a wide variety of inflammasomes, mainly produced by your mitochondria.
Wow. And I think from a anti-aging or longevity perspective, it's all we're now digging into the mitochondria now more than ever. And so it's interesting because a lot of people, if you look at kind of why people use the ketogenic diet, obviously you mentioned this, from epilepsy back in 1924. So it's almost been 100 years when people have used this therapeutically in the modern days. But then you go way back and you can find some usefulness with it. But can you talk about like some of the benefits of people actually maintaining a ketone state or using ketones as a fuel source, and what the alternatives are? Because I think there's some risks if our body only uses glucose. And maybe you could talk about the dual engine system.
Right. So we are way back 400,000 years ago at the beginning of man, and also even in animals, okay? Studies of over the so-called 100 species studies in carnivorous animals demonstrate that the biological chemistry of our body is not just similar amongst carnivorous animals, it's actually absolutely identical. So the way a tiger produces energy, the way a gorilla produces energy, the way a mammal, carnivorous animal like a killer shark produces energy is not just similar, it's actually molecularly identical. So given that fact, and given the fact that these animals hunt, so during periods of when they're not eating or starving, they're using one fuel, as opposed to when the fed state, where the food is immediately available, like whatever prey they killed to eat, produces another kind of fuel. These two fuels are basically glucose, a type of sugar, which is 6 molecules, or ketones, which is a 1 carbon molecule. So the way I like to explain this is to look at a car like the Toyota Prius, a hybrid. So the hybrid has a gasoline engine and an electric motor, and it's got a brain in between. And this brain, decides what's the ambient temperature of the car sitting in, whether it's climbing up or going down or making a fast turn, the driving style, what payloads in it, a wide variety of factors. So it shifts back and forth between the two different fuel systems. And the goal when Toyota programmed this was for maximum longevity and ease of maintenance. So that when the electric engine is running and the gas isn't, the gas is resting or might be cooling down or something like that, and vice versa. Well, the difference between a Prius hybrid is we park the car and we shut it off, but our bodies are very different. We go from a starving state in which we are using ketones, or a fed state in which, we rolled the window down and somebody threw in a hamburger, fries, and a Coke, and there's your fuel source. So that immediate glucose source, when it's not there, we shift. But because we don't hunt, we don't fast, and we don't use that part of the engine. So the difference is that in a balanced animal in the wild, when they're fasting and using their ketone engine, or they're fed and they're using their glucose engine, is that when the other engine, whichever one it might be, is at rest, we undergo something called autophagy or autophagy. And that is where the body, that system, that engine that's at rest, takes the time out to clean itself, throw out the debris, replace broken parts, etc. And then it revs up, and the other one slows down, and that part of the motor cleans itself, throws out all the debris, and replaces parts. So by having this quote metabolic flexibility, or switching back and forth in energy states, gives us better reliability and a longer life of the engine or the cell.
Wow. And when people have this metabolic flexibility, I know in your career, you just, you were seeing people with massive metabolic disease, when you were a practicing physician. And, when we were chatting earlier, you mentioned that, you saw these patients and you started wondering, how can I actually go upstream and help them? But have you seen somebody reverse like diabetes or kidney disease or liver disease by going to a ketogenic diet?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's where our future's headed, is that our understanding of ketone medicine, or this other half of the energy, is now diving into, in the more recent years, much more serious diseases of inflammation, disease derangements of immunity, etc. My background's in immunology and intensive care medicine. And, so I've been manipulating the immune system for decades. And what we see is that by shutting off this inflammatory molecules produced by the mitochondria, which are bothered by high insulin levels, as in patients who have insulin resistant and obesity, or diabesity, as sometimes it's called, they downturn that. We had a woman who was 64-year-old Asian lady who had been on insulin for 26 years, and we got her back to her high school weight, and she stopped all of her insulin and has been off of insulin for over 3 years after having been on insulin for 26 years. Now, she does take some diabetic medications, but her overall health is better. Blood pressure, respiratory rate, skin, all these things. In the case of fatty liver disease, which, by the way, is the most common disease that the CDC has, about 80% of random abdominal ultrasounds in Americans will show fatty liver disease. And that's because every time we eat, every excess calorie gets parked away as fat. So you build fat ubiquitously. So you build fat in your fingertip as well as your liver. So when the liver gets congested with fat, its function is not as very good. And it actually mimics alcoholic liver disease. In fact, if you do biopsies of people who have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and alcoholic fatty liver disease, and you present them to the pathologist, they look at the slide, they can't tell you who's drinking alcohol and who's overweight.
Wow, is that right? So it looks the same. I mean,
identical.
Wow. And so you've seen with the ketogenic diet that gets switched over and the liver is able to regenerate itself and get rid of some of that fatty liver disease, which is a big one, because we often see the ALT, AST elevated, the triglycerides elevated, and then we look at their C-peptide, their insulin fasting levels are high, and
Yes.
but even if their hemoglobin A1C still looks great, and that's all their doctors are checking, but we want to go deeper in it. So you received a lot of flack. I mean, your academic world you came from, there probably wasn't a lot of support, a decade ago when you started studying ketones. How did you, what gave you the fortitude to just say, I'm going all in on this, on ketones?
Well, I think at the time, I was actually very interested in weight loss as sort of my last part of my hurrah in my 40 plus years of practicing medicine because 70% of Americans are overweight.
Yeah.
And not only you have orthopedic problems and fatty liver and breathing problems because your stomach's pushing up your lungs, it really affects your whole body. So I figured, well, this is something I read about is burning your fat. The only way to really get rid of your weight is to burn it. And so, we have to convert the system to burning the fat. And the only way to do that is, and it's more than just the diet, by the way. It's what's important is the diet, the so-called classic ketogenic diet is actually quite draconian. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that. And in fact, Atkins diet, which is a high protein diet, is also very effective. The most important part is to restrict your carbohydrates. So if you want to go up and down on the fat and protein and mix it or go back and forth, that's fine with me. I think what's important is a low carbohydrate diet. So I'm not necessarily in favor of the pure ketogenic diet. I think you can drink ketones and get just as much done, if not more, by creating a higher level of ketosis. But the big fear that we have in talking to healthcare workers and patients is what in medical school was, quote, ketoacidosis.
Yeah.
So everybody gets worried about that, and it put a bad sort of taint on the word keto. But now PubMed, in major universities who had previously 5 years ago completely poo-pooed the ketogenic diet now have whole divisions dedicated to low carbohydrate ketogenic diets, intermittent protein diets. The National Institutes of Health have started an extensive study on ketogenic ketosis, targeted ketosis, which is really what I am promoting is targeted ketosis, not necessarily the diet.
Got it. And what would you classify as low carb, like for men and low carb for women?
Okay, that's a great question. Low carbohydrate takes many sorts of explanations, okay? But I think when you're up at 100 grams a day, that's way too much. And if you look at it, the carbohydrate consumption, and you use it in equivalents of pounds of sugar per annum per American, is somewhere between 150 to 300 pounds per annum per American per year, which is enormous amount of sugar. Wow. Now, if you say, let's be reasonable about this, a draconian diet would be at 20 grams, okay? Under 20 grams of total carbohydrates per day. Now, remember, 26 grams is about an ounce, right? So if you're talking about a 30-gram diet, that's an ounce of sugar. Have you ever poured an ounce of sugar into a shot glass? It's a lot of sugar. You wouldn't dare eat that all at once, right? So while it may seem difficult, if you actually pour an ounce of sugar, weigh it on a little scale and look at it, you think, wow, that's a lot of sugar. I wouldn't put that in my coffee,
Right.
So I think a reasonable approach is 30 grams or below. You can try for 20 grams. You might not make it, but it doesn't matter. What it does is it turns on the fat burning system. And because it turns on the fat burning system, you're going to burn fat, period. Now, whether you burn it slowly or you burn it really fast, doesn't matter. You can have the patience. It took you several decades to get to that level of fat in your body. And to take a few months to get it down, who cares? It's safe, it's effective, and it's not tortuous.
Yeah. Well, and with the new innovations with peptides, we've got like 5-amino-1-MQ or MOD-SC that can help turn it on. There's growth hormone secretagogues. And then if we need to, we can even use some of the GLP-1s. You mentioned a couple of them earlier, and they do seem to stack really well. What would you say the contraindications are with a ketogenic diet? Like if someone has a thyroid issue or maybe a fungal overgrowth, or what have you found in your research?
Right. So first of all, you're absolutely right. The use of key amino acids, the use of other signaling agents, the proportion, the diet construct, as well as the exogenous ketones. What would I say the major contraindications are? Anyone who is a type 1 insulin dependent diabetic cannot do it. People who are taking SGLT1 inhibitors like Januvia cannot be on this for the risk. They can be, but they must be observed by a physician. And not only just any physician, it's got to be somebody who's skilled in ketosis as well as skilled in the administration of that classification of drugs. Now, as far as the synergy, all of those previous methods that you mentioned all will work in synergy with the semaglutides. And the reason why is the reason why it's safe is because, first of all, the reason why the GLP-1 agonists have gained so much popularity is because they're easy. You just get a shot and you stop eating. And that's because they modify ghrelin. But the cost is unbelievably prohibitive. So we at Keto 5 have figured out that we can take patients who are been in ketosis, add semaglutide. We can take patients that are on semaglutide, add ketones. And once people reach their target weight, they can get off the semaglutides and continue as maintenance with ketones. So we fit in every piece of the puzzle from, if you're on this and you want to add as to get more power. But here's the key. When you look at the costing of the dose of semaglutide, it's very expensive. And the first dose is what they advertise about. But usually that's the starting dose, and you have to be ramped up. And we found that adding the exogenous ketones in, because their cost base is so much lower than semaglutide, that you can actually cut the required semaglutide requirement and get the same effect, because they both modulate ghrelin. And adding the other amino acids and the other manipulations for sure will work. There's two things I want to say about semaglutides. One is that it's reported that 43% of patients experience one of the top 5 adverse events, that 23% of people actually don't achieve target weight before they quit for adverse events. And it's reported that 63% of patients will gain 100% of their weight within 40 weeks of cessation. And that's because they haven't retuned their brain on how to eat.
Yeah, we've seen that. And we also see when you dose semaglutide at what the manufacturers of like Ozempic are prescribing, the gastric distress that it causes is very it gets in the way of the quality of life when you're nauseated all the time, or you've got diarrhea, or you're constipated. And so we're big fans of doing a microdose of the semaglutide or tirzepatide, and then using like BPC 157 or some of the Keto 5 products, so that our patients, not only do they lose weight more sustainably, but they don't have the side effects that come along with that peptide.
That's exactly right. I think that we are looking at how to control weight in America in a safe manner, and multimodality will be, I believe, will rule the day.
Yeah, totally. Yep. Yeah, this is exciting because what you've done, and if we just start looking at what Keto 5's done with like the Exo Genius, the Exo Perform, the Exo Immune, You're one of the few companies, and I really appreciate. I had Gary Millett on the podcast before, and many of you may remember that podcast. He's partners with Rob Rogers, but you guys have done some things very uniquely so that your ketones are very targeted. So you're not just throwing out ketones that can. I think the biggest complaint that I've heard from my clients over the past is that they can get some acid reflux with some of the ketones. But tell us a little bit about what makes Keto 5. How are you able to target it, and how are you able to use it in a way that's more specialized versus just a general ketone product?
That's right. So we're very medically focused. I spent a large number of years in the labs and working in pharma. So it's important for me to present a product that can be adjusted. So we have something called ATAC, which is called adjustable targeted adjuvant ketosis. The ketosis is added on. We've put certain additives that will mitigate gastric acidity, gastric hypermotility. We use a low glycemic index, very tiny dose of a polymerized carbohydrate that helps to mitigate all the gastrointestinal upset. That's our patented formulation. That's not part of our licensing from Real Ketones. So we've done different formulations. Our formulations are very different than what you may find in big box retailers or other online services. This is a medically derived product developed by physicians and tested over time. And we believe that we have sustainable results in patients that have, let's say, 30 pounds of weight loss well over 3 years and sustained better energy profiles. So there are a number of things that we've done in our performance products. We have certain kind of drugs that improve mental reaction time, vigilance, nootropics. There are these elements that we put in our exoimmune. We have no sodium, so we use it in patients that have sodium restriction. For instance, someone who wants to be in ketosis who might have congestive heart failure. There are some papers that suggest that cardiac muscle, ketones actually have certain preferred areas to operate. And when you think about it, an animal that is starving has to be, in order to catch its prey, has to be smarter, faster, stronger, and have better cardiac output. So, interestingly enough, whoever the heck designed us, when we are in high ketosis, the brain gets faster and sharper, the musculature has faster reaction time, and the cardiac pumping capacity is better under ketosis. So when we target our ketosis by using a bottle that allows us to flex the dose high and low to get the targeted ketosis, we then achieve a particular result with based on the weight of the person, the sex of the person, the goals of that ketosis, whether it's just shutting off the appetite or it's modulating, inflammasomes produced by the mitochondria.
Got it. And that flexible dose is pretty powerful, because I was talking to Dr. Dan Kellums, and you'll meet him at the Go Wellness event. We're going to have Dr. Wool at Go Wellness. So all of you practitioners out there, don't miss the next Go Wellness session. But he uses the Keto 5 products to treat endometriosis. Mm-hmm. And a lot of his PCOS patients, polycystic ovarian syndrome, because it all boils down to insulin resistance, and he's just seen phenomenal things. So maybe you could talk about the mechanism behind there, and why he would see such great results, because he literally puts all of his fertility patients on the ketones.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so this is sort of a little bit of high science, and I hope your patients can follow along with this. But when you eat carbs, your body doesn't want all that carbohydrate, but yet it wants to take it and push it into the cell, right? So your insulin levels go up, and it's something called tachyphylaxis. It requires more and more and more insulin to get the same amount of sugar into your mitochondria. That's essentially what goes on. But recent science over the last, let's say, since 1990 shows that high levels of insulin cause mitochondrial inflammation and destruction. And so all these major inflammasomes come out, and there's at least 85 different inflammasomes and at least 16 different oncogenes. And these small molecule signaling agents will go to the uterus and cause generalized inflammation, hormonal derangement, polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS, is extraordinarily common in obese women. Yeah. And including several of my staff who had PCOS, unable to get pregnant. I put them on our exogenous ketones. They each lost 30 pounds. And by the way, they were sisters, separated by 2 years. They both gave birth to children, and they both successful, healthy kids. They both, unfortunately, gained the weight back, then wanted to have kids again. So they couldn't conceive when they were overweight. And we have ultrasound pictures of their PCOS. And then they shrunk. When they shrunk the weight, they got pregnant again, and all came out well. So, I mean, that's pretty much cause and effect.
Right. Yeah. Wow. And what about the second time around? Did they decide to keep the weight off?
One of them did. Unfortunately, they have a certain ethnicity that encourages carbohydrates, unfortunately.
Sure. Yeah. There's so many things that are so many variables. If we could just get everybody 100% compliant, then it'd be easy. But ketones.
What's really interesting, I'll tell you what, we are in a very exciting era now, because if you think about it, 25 years ago or 35 years ago, there were, the so-called laboratory was really relegated to Olympians. They would measure their blood, they biopsy their muscles, their skin. They were training by primitive computers. But today, because we have all these devices, we have an Apple Watch, we have Oura Ring, we have continuous ketone, continuous glucose meters, we have breathalyzers. We can take these devices and create our own ability to really do extraordinarily detailed analysis of our bodies. And through manipulation of exogenous ketones, amino acid supplementation, other nutrients, etc., we can fine tune ourselves, sleep patterns, everything. So I believe the idea that longevity will be the outgrowth of this highly, technologically advanced, consumer available analysis.
Yeah. Well, and it's our primary energy source, ideally, our ketones. And so if you say, well, how can we really properly feed the mitochondria? Well, ketones just might be the very best way. So, right. and the beautiful thing about your work is you actually, you come from a clinical research background. I mean, you've gotten drugs to market, you've dealt with the FDA directly. I mean, you know how to do science the right way. And what's some of the most interesting research trials that you've had going on, and what do you see is the future of ketones?
So ketone research is so dynamic now. Probably 10 years ago, there were probably less than 100 articles produced. By 2022, there were something like 25,000 articles produced. So the curve is like a straight vertical curve. The things that are most exciting now are signaling, small cell signaling. In other words, important fact, your ketones like beta hydroxybutyrate exist in enantiomers, a right hand and a left hand molecule like this. And before, people thought all the power was in the D. Well, now they're starting to look at the L and how this affects basic chemistry, like how calcium flows in a neuron is perhaps dependent on how much L is around, even though it's a minority population in the body, okay, or a 50% proportion in the body. So I think all of this is really magical in the sense that our beginning understanding of ketones, we are just at the tip of the iceberg. So that while we were thinking, oh, you've got to maintain high levels of ketosis to lose weight, and that point in fact might be true, it might not. But more importantly, episodic ketosis may portend to signaling, more improved neuronal signaling, cognitive disorders. These are all things in the future. We have trials going on which have to do with cancers, which have to do with cognitive disorders, memory issues, reaction times on e-gaming, or reaction time with a pistol, or reaction time, boxing or repetitive motions. So there is a whole host of things, even including night vision, macular degeneration. All these sorts of things are things that we're exploring right now in some of our clinical trials. I think we're literally at the beginning of an entire frontier and a paradigm shift in healthcare, by the way.
Man, well, and and that's I see peptides is the same way, and that's conversations you and I had prior to this podcast, and I had it with Gary. But I see the same thing, because all peptides are is how cell signaling. It's right there. And so if we can figure out how to optimize the peptide pathways in the body, how to optimize the energy source, that's really, in my opinion, that will accelerate longevity faster than probably anything else we're studying.
That's right. Peptide science is really at a forefront right now. I think the work that you guys are doing is immensely important, because these are the things that are going on in the body. We right now on this podcast, we're having a conversation, and because we have ears, eyes, and a mouth, right? But in our body, our cells need to talk to each other. They need to send signaling to do this, or go find that fungus and get rid of it, or hunt down that cancer cell, or improve energy, right? So these signaling things, peptides, enzymes, all small molecules, etc., are all going to be found to be critical elements of improved wellness, improved longevity, and improved cellular and organ function, for sure, 100%.
Yeah. And if you look at, where the science is going and what you guys are finding, where do you see the biggest mistake is? I mean, you talked about the episodic, ketone state. Do you find that people push themselves too hard to stay in ketosis, 100% of the time, or where do you see people, kind of injure themselves almost with a ketone diet?
Well, it's that here's the thing. In a ketone diet, okay, is, as I said, it's very draconian. And some people who have become sort of fixated on it, there are issues of the kinds of foods you may eat to establish ketosis, may put you at a small risk for elevated gallstones, kidney stones, those kinds of things. There are sometimes when ketosis goes up too fast, you can get some skin rashes. But I think this will become better understood with time, and that the role of a pure ketones is different than the role of eating a marbled prime rib every night. Okay, so or eating bacon all day long. I mean, the nitrites themselves might even hurt you. So I think that this is science in a flux, discovery in a flux. I think at this juncture, including things like rapamycin and other mTOR inhibitors like metformin, et cetera, we are beginning to slowly understand this small molecular phenomena. Certainly the pharmaceutical industry with all of its new products. Well, here's a new IL-23 inhibitor, right? Or an IL-6 inhibitor. And in fact, if you look at COVID, where cytokine storm, right? Where you've got high levels of these interleukins and CRP and TNF alpha, et cetera, which are things that portend to outcomes that are not as favorable in COVID as opposed to people who may not have cytokine storm. And by the way, obese people are prone to have cytokine storm. That's what the literature supports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think it's a very exciting time.
Well, and I couldn't agree more. And I think anybody who's done a ketogenic diet and just put themselves in that state, you just notice the clarity that comes from it. And now that there's the Keto 5, there's actually ketones that you can use to support that. Then maybe you don't have to be so crazy on the diet itself. You can actually have a little more flexibility, which is the beautiful thing about this. Because sometimes a nice piece of bread is just really enjoyable.
And that's right. That's absolutely right. We're not trying. I coined the term nutritional forgiveness. Yeah. That is, you know what? Look, we have a modern society and a modern life. We're not going to be like Soylent Green and eat these weird little, food bars. We're going to enjoy our life and enjoy our eating, And I think that's why all these maneuvers are out there to sort of mimic what a wild animal does, whether it's 8-16 fasting, the so-called vilification of fat, which was done by Ansel Keys, who himself was a vegetarian and was an animal rights person. And we have to think twice about the motivation of why he vilified animal fat. So I think when you look at who we are as a species and where we are in culture, and we have this combination of things that, yes, we need to do things not way over here, but then again, not way over here. And if we've had 100 years or 200 years of carbohydrate living where 92% of our life is driven on sugar and 8% in ketosis, whereas wild animals are 40 to 60% in ketosis in life, that's a big difference.
So you would aim for more of a 50-50 then?
Yeah, balanced.
Yeah, and that it makes a lot of sense because I find that I've had several clients over the years who they've gone all in on the ketogenic diet, but they end up eating a lot of the processed foods, and some of those sugar alcohols just end up destroying their gut. And so that's one thing I really appreciate about what you've done is you've created the medical grade ketones, but also showing us how to pulse it at the right levels.
Right.
And so this will be exciting. And for those of you who are really excited about this, this will be one of the new additions to our programs at East West. And so we're really excited to have the Keto 5 as one of our partners and to carry the products. But what's the best way that people can learn more about you or about the Keto 5 mission or company?
Well, you can go to our website, which is Keto5, Keto number 5.com, where, you can read physicians' comments. You can read about the science. We have a library. We have videos, and it's ever expanding. We're adding more each and every day. So that's one thing that's be very, very informative for people. You can always send a question through the website to us, and you can even say, Dr. Wool, answer this question for me, and I will be sure to get back to you.
Wow.
So, I really think that certainly appreciate the opportunity, and just it's magnificent to see that science is changing. Our culture is responding to things that probably the way we are built, and making modifications to our lifestyles that will make a difference.
Man, well, I can't thank you enough. I feel like we could go on another 3-4 hours, so we'll have to do this again soon. And I'll make sure for those of you who are listening, we'll record some of Dr. Wool's presentation at our medical conference coming up here as well. And I'll post some highlights of that. And then we'll have you back on, Dr. Wool. So thank you so much for your research, and so grateful that you transitioned over into looking at things that can actually extend life and improve health instead of just the disease management world. So thank you.
Well, I think that's what our goal is, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to work with your organization, and I'm available anytime.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And for those of you who love the show, make sure you share this episode with your family, friends, and loved ones. I think the ketogenic diet and now transitioning into the new world using some of these ketones can be life-changing. So appreciate you all, and we'll see you next time.